Welcome back to the Forge. Today we're making a nail header, which, as the name suggests, is unsurprisingly used for making hand-forged nails. Now, making nails is a fantastic way to get your hammer control down, get used to doing repetitive work, and really speeding up your blacksmithing. But before we can do any of that, we need to make one of these, so let's get onto it.
For this project, I'm using a chunk of spring. I didn't measure it, but it's around 15mm diameter. First step is to straighten it out. Here I take a fairly long heat around the spring, I hook it onto the horn, pulling it back towards me with the tongs, and I strike down on the far side of the horn to untighten the coil. Here is a side-on diagram which demonstrates the technique. Once we've uncoiled it enough, we can slot it into the hardy hole and just pull it straight. This won't get it completely straight, but then we can use the anvil face to flatten it out the rest of the way. When straightening the spring, I like to lay it diagonally across the anvil face, so it gives us the longest possible flat surface. Then, we can strike any high spots while we turn it to straighten it out. Once we have a straight piece of spring, we can start upsetting one end to add more mass. Until now, I've been using V-bit tongs, but here we'll switch to pickup tongs so that we can hold it vertically and strike the end. For this, we want a short heat on the end to reduce bending. But unlike mild steel, we can't cool any excess with water since it will harden. So, we just have to be careful to only heat the end. When upsetting the piece, it'll want to buckle. So regularly, we'll lay it flat on the anvil face and remove any bends. Once we have a little more mass in the end, we'll lay it at a very shallow angle across the anvil face, with around an inch sticking over the far edge. Then, we'll strike down with our hammer half on, half off the anvil to create a shoulder. Oh look! Another diagram. Then we'll turn 90 degrees and do the same thing, making sure that we don't move the piece forwards or backwards, just rolling it over to ensure that the shoulders stay in line. We continue to deepen the shoulders. At this point I decided that we had a little too much length that could be converted to width. So, with the shoulders hooked in over the anvil edge, I strike back against the anvil to thicken the end up. This results in the blob on the end thickening both at the end of it and at the point where it's in contact with the anvil corner. Something like this shape. So, we'll bring that onto the flat and just dress that in. In the next stage, we're flattening down the blob on the end so that it spreads and has even thickness. If, however, we only did this, we'd end up with a square head on our nail header, and what we want is a circular head. So, in addition, we'll also be turning it sideways on the anvil, tilting our hand down and striking down so that we knock the corners off the square into a more octagonal shape, which can be refined into a circle later. You'll notice at this stage we have something more like a teardrop than a circle, and our shoulders are uneven, so in this next stage we'll once again hook it over the edge of the anvil and strike back to push one shoulder back and make them more even. We'll also be going round the head with a tilted hammer to taper off the edges and make it slightly domed. We can continue refining this shape with lighter blows until we're happy that it looks even and aesthetically pleasing. Next, we must turn our attention to the handle. To make drawing down easier and keeping the head off the anvil, we'll place two shoulders, as we did for the head, just over an anvil's width away from the head. These show us where to start drawing down the handle. We simply draw out between these two shoulders. For more information on drawing out, please see my tong video, over there. Now for the main event. Punching the hole for making our nails. For this we'll use a tapered square punch. Flipping the header over so that the domed face is against the anvil, we'll make a first light punch to ensure that the hole is square to the handle. Not strictly necessary, but it makes the piece look much neater. Then we'll start punching through. I'm cooling this in vegetable oil between punches and wearing a glove to protect from the radiant heat. We'll keep punching through and cooling the punch as we go. Oh look, the oil is now actually on screen. When we're nearly through, we'll place a bolster plate underneath, though you could use the Pritchell hole, and we'll complete the hole. I like to do a little light punch from the top, just to round off the corners at the top of the hole to stop the nails from sticking in. Next, we need to cut it down to length, so I'm going to cut it off with a hot cut hardy. Since this way, I don't have to wait for it to cool down because it's spring steel, we can't just quench it. But you can use an angle grinder or a hacksaw or something else. Go for it. I often store my tools hanging from hooks, and this one will be no exception, so we're going to put a little hook on the end. We're going to do a set down about 2 centimeters from the end and draw that out into a long thin taper, and then put a scroll on it. Details for scrolling can be found in my fire tools video. There. We use gentle blows when shaping the hook so we don't deform the scroll, or alternatively, if this was mild steel, you could cool it off. It has a tendency to want to twist, so we'll bring it on the anvil face and level it all out. To finish, we'll wire brush it, and then it's done. You may have noticed that I've made this out of high carbon steel, but I haven't heat treated it. It doesn't need to be hard since a nail header doesn't have an edge, but making it out of high carbon steel makes it a little tougher. Preferably, if you can get your hands on a mid-carbon alloy, this is perfect. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more blacksmithing tutorials, there'll be a video popping up over there right now. If you'd like to support the channel, a like and subscribe is always appreciated, and for even more support there is a link to the Patreon in the description below. Until next time, see ya!